Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I've mentioned this before, but I like to talk about the disturbing trend that's occurred at the same time as the globalists have taken over, at the same time as mass migration has been forced on the West. During this same time, government jobs that traditionally used to be paid quite a bit less than the equivalent private sector job, and now paying substantially more than the equivalent private sector job. And even though I remember sort of in say the mid 90s, government jobs still didn't pay as well as the private sector. But now there's quite a difference. A department head, for example, a government department head can be paid the equivalent of a senior CEO role in a medium-sized, a successful business. So this is something that it's a turnaround that's occurred, and certainly in average wage jobs, but also the explosion in social justice type jobs. For example, a government job for an angry lesbian covered in tattoos and nose rings and septum piercing and this and that, they can be paid double the salary of a factory manager of a large factory. If I look at the jobs in, say, a local government like county government, county council type government, and you look at the jobs there, there's some very, very well-paid jobs in government that simply didn't exist years ago. Not only are they well-paid, but relative to the private sector, they're very well-paid. So private sector wages, wage growth has stalled quite considerably, whereas in government, not only are there many more government jobs than there were 3 or 4 decades ago, but these jobs are quite well-paid. So now, jobs are being public government jobs are being guaranteed more and more to people who are not local people. So I can go through entire government departments now. I'm lucky to see more than 1 or 2 white people. Similar in a hospital. I look at the number of white people who are nurses and doctors and so on. They're now a minority. And locally born people, if there is a supervisor, then they don't have an Australian accent. Now, there's a few things that have converged here, during mass migration and the social justice movement and so on and so forth. There've been an explosion in public sector jobs, and these jobs have gone into social justice type roles. They've gone to people that aren't white. They've gone to minorities, supposed minorities, gay lesbians, black lesbians, Indians who are coming straight off the boat or straight off the airplane, walking straight into a well-paid public service job that they wouldn't have a snowball's chance of getting in a competitive job situation. And there was someone who applied not that long ago to me for a job as a woman, and her opening line when I answered, the call was put through to me, and there was meant to be an inquiries line, but I took it, and she and it was quite a senior IT role, and she her opening comment was, "You have no idea how hard it is to be a woman. Misogyny and patriarchy and Nazis and fascists are everywhere. So if I don't get the job," she opines, "then it must be because of fascism and Nazi and maybe even you're Hitler." And that's, needless to say, the conversation didn't last very long. But I was quite surprised to look that she had been hired in a state government to be the chief executive of IT operations. Now, I'd seen her CV, and I wouldn't have employed her as a junior IT flunky, and yet she pops up in probably the most prestigious job in IT, at least IT operations, most prestigious jobs in the whole state, and very handsomely paid it was too. Also, some of the bigger federal government departments, the salaries being handed out to department heads and senior department players are 5, 6, 7, 800,000, 900,000 packaged up. You're pushing $1 million by the time you've got travel and other benefits thrown in. Now, this is for a public servant. This is not for some private sector job. It's in the public service. Now, if you look at the equivalent job, the pay for something equivalent to that. So if you go outside, say, the finance sector, which pays unusually well. So if you go outside of that, there's very few private sector equivalent jobs that pay $1 million there. So this is one of the better paid jobs in the whole of Australia. Now, if you look at the top 10%, best paid jobs in Australia 50 years ago, you'd be lucky to find even a single government job. Now, if you scroll through the best paid jobs in Australia, the majority, in fact, sometimes the entire swathe of best paid jobs are all government or NGOs or Quangos. Right? That all, and these three together seem to form a conga line where they sort of just round robin between each other. So someone that today is a senior player in a government department, tomorrow they could be the CEO of an NGO, then back into the government department, then they'll pop up as a big name in a Quango and so on. So there's a little conga line there that goes around of people. But the point I'm making here is that government used to be, it offered long-term job security, a reasonably good retirement benefits, but the pay wasn't that good. The hours were shorter, but the pay wasn't that good. That's how it was. So if you wanted to make money, you didn't even think of government. That was the last thing you'd think of. But if you were somebody, say a minority, I know there's guys who I didn't realise they were homosexual at the time, but they would go into government, as they would see that as they had better sort of long-term job protection, things like that. Now, I've done a lot of, as I've mentioned numerous times, I've done a lot of business traveling all around the world through authoritarian regimes, dirt poor third world countries that always have a small nucleus of mega rich, by the way. And your first world countries, middle income countries that are just coming out of communist authoritarianism, and so on and so forth. So, and one thing that's fairly clear with and looking at, say, places like Eastern Europe during the Cold War, the Soviet Union and so on, the best jobs, as even you see in Cuba, for example, today, the best jobs are the jobs that best protect or are seen as best protecting the interests of the government or the ideology. So government employees would have access to shops that the hoi polloi and the masses wouldn't have. They'd have better apartments, they'd have better everything, and access to Western goods and so on. And also in, say, the international hotels, things like that, and those two, they would be privileged positions. Any position where you were allowed to travel, typically be a government job anyway. If you wanted to go on a vacation, then if you had a government job, you had much better access to good vacation locations and better hotels. You were allowed to travel internationally, which was quite rare for Soviet and East European citizens. You could travel to, you could go on a cruise to Cuba or somewhere from the Soviet Union and or to Vietnam, those sorts of things. And so, but not everyone could do that. They either didn't have the resource to do it or not the contacts. So the government employees were a class of their own, and they were an elite class, and they did very well, and certainly relative to the others. And the more senior you were in government, the more then you would also be able to have access to, say, a country cottage, and again, better food and better access to medical care and all sorts of things like that the masses didn't have. Now, this was always in the poorer countries, a government job meant you could extort bribes from people. So, being at going in third world countries where they'll claim there's an irregularity with my passport, and they'll have to send me back to the destination I've come from, which they tell me Mr. Billy Bob, it's going to be very expensive and inconvenient for you. You don't want that, do you? But if you give us $100, we'll let you go. And this was in third world corrupt countries. It was always, just to drive me crazy, there was always the pressure and the harassment for paying fucking bribes. But they're corrupt countries, basket case corrupt countries, and public service jobs, whether it be in customs, immigration, or anything else, police officer, it gave you that license to be able to extort money from people and to be immune from prosecution for doing so. So, and then, of course, there were the first world countries where government employees had a duty to the public service, had a duty to the public, but private sector employees had higher risk and they made higher salaries. Now, wherever you see the reverse is the case, where the government employees are the best paid in the community and where the best paid jobs are government jobs, which they are in Australia now. If I go through the top right now, I go through the job board, like the online internet job board, if I go through that list, more than 3/4, in some cases 100%, because I check it every few weeks, 100% will be government or NGO quango jobs, not private sector. And private sector jobs, again, why would you pay $300,000 a year for an advisor on lesbian issues? Why would you even pay that much? How would the job even fucking exist? And yet a senior factory manager of some of the largest factories in Australia gets paid half that. And what has happened to the value proposition of work and reward in the economy? It's been totally turned on its head, all for the benefit of government control, government power, government reach. And so government jobs, of which now majority are non-white in Australia, government jobs are the better paid jobs, the more prestigious. And there are people coming from India who, again, are walking straight off the airplane into a public service job they don't even have to compete for. They're not qualified, and they're just gifted these jobs. And the purpose is, as far as I can see, is that the public service is meant to reflect the need of a Western government to control and contain its discontented white population, as the white population is being displaced and impoverished at the same time. You've been a Tassos Australia Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.